So Gear 5 was one of the most series-shaking reveals in One Piece. Chapter 1044 blew the collective minds of the fandom, and the truth of Luffy's Devil Fruit was completely unpredictable. Now, since that chapter was released, Gear 5 has been one of the major focal points of discussion in the fandom, and with the transformation's first appearance in the anime, those discussions have become even more prevalent. So many things remain mysterious. What exactly is the extent of the fruit's powers? Who is the sun god Nika? Does the fruit really have a mind of its own, and did it choose Luffy? What is the connection to Joy Boy? These sorts of questions have been posed and theorized about endlessly, and while I do have some ideas, I'm not here to try and solve that puzzle. What I want to do is approach another angle of discussion, being the writing of Gear 5 and what it means for the story. Is it just an ass pull? Did Oda have this planned? Does this ruin anything established previously in the series, and is it even well written? First things first, let's establish what the power really is. In chapter 1044, the Gorosei give the other name of the Gum Gum fruit in a brief description. The other name for the Gum Gum fruit is the zone-type human-human fruit, mythical-type model Nika, possessing a body with the properties of rubber and fighting in whatever way he fancies, bringing smiles to the faces of the people. The warrior of liberation, also known as Nika, the sun god. Awakening brings his rubbery body greater physical strength and freedom. It is said that in all the world, there is no power more ridiculous. Honestly, crazy good hype job. Props to the Gorosei for that. For the power itself, from what is described and what we saw throughout the course of the fight with Kaido, Awakening grants Luffy more freedom with his body, as is evident with the way he contorts it and grows, but it also gives him greater strength, likely meaning he hits harder and is more durable, of course. One very important thing to note is that these abilities are only granted in his awakened form. I've seen people talking about how this ruins Luffy's journey throughout the series because he secretly had this super strong, crazy ability all along, and not just the ability to be rubber. And that just isn't true at all. What we saw of Luffy's abilities prior to his awakening was exactly what they seemed. There was no secret power boost. The base power of the fruit literally just turns your body into rubber, and there's nothing that suggests otherwise. Luffy made his power so effective because of how creatively he used it, and that's exactly why Gear 5 is so fitting. Luffy has always been coming up with wild, crazy ways to contort and stretch his body. It's always just come to him instinctually. Multiple times he even pushed his body past its limits because it could not keep up with his ideas. See Gear 2, Gear 3, and even Gear 4 all have immense physical drawbacks. They require an extreme effort in order to meet what Luffy wants to do with his body. But with Gear 5, Luffy has complete and total freedom over his body. He can fight in any which way he chooses. He can inflate parts of his bodies like in Gear 3 much quicker and easier, and with far more control. At one point he even becomes a giant, which he certainly could not do before. But when he's in his awakened form, his body isn't fighting to keep up with his mind. He can do whatever he pleases. In no way does it take away from how Luffy reached this point, all the trials he was put through over the course of One Piece. If anything, it's a reward for precisely that, for mastering the less than stellar base power of the Gum Gum fruit and pushing it to heights it likely has never seen before. We should also note that having this power doesn't make Luffy literally a god. He doesn't have some omnipotent power or anything like that. Luffy is not some divine being. He just has a devil fruit power that, when in awakened form, grants him some greater abilities. Think of Sengoku. I mean, he has the Buddha fruit, but he's not literally a god. He's not literally Buddha. He just has Buddha-like powers. Now, I said Gear 5 is a reward for Luffy, but it's also a reward for us as readers. This massive evolutionary step in Luffy's fighting style has brought some of the most creative, interesting, and just fun action in the series. It is an awe-inspiring display, reminiscent of Rubber Hose cartoons of Popeye and Tom and Jerry, which are very clearly things Oda has drawn inspiration from. It's goofy, it's cartoony, it's just awesome. So narratively, the power set itself is the perfect next step for Luffy. It maximizes his creativity and ingenuity and allows Oda to even more perfectly capture the essence of Luffy through his fights. But to be honest though, it's important to illustrate just how perfect that aspect of it is. What the Awakening grants in terms of an ability set isn't exactly the contentious part of Gear 5. Is Gear 5 an ass pull? Now, this is something that's been discussed since the initial reveal. Ass pull is a term that people love to throw around, so let's define it real quick. A hastily fabricated explanation or contrived plot twist. That's the first definition you're going to find online. Something that comes out of nowhere, something that feels completely unrealistic, something that doesn't fit with the previously established story. Does that apply to Gear 5? You may be nodding your head emphatically, frothing at the mouth, sweating and shaking. Yes, it is an ass pull. Yes, it is. It's garbage. It sucks. Oda is a hack. Oda sucks. Well, no, it isn't an ass pull. Sorry to disappoint, but I don't think that's fair to say considering, I don't know, themes and imagery, direct plot points, the overarching idea of the entire story. Small things, very easy to miss, don't blame me if it did. It's just the entire foundation of the story that Gear 5 hinges upon. Okay, what exactly do I mean? Well, it's pretty simple. Nika is the god of the sun and the warrior of liberation. At face value, those two ideas don't seem very connected, but I can assure you that in the world of One Piece, they absolutely are. Throughout the series, sun imagery has been used to symbolically represent freedom. Some of the clearest examples of this are first in Skypiea, where Luffy destroys the storm cloud created by Enel, screams, "Let the sun shine," and proceeds to defeat Enel and free the country. And second with the fishmen in general, how the fishmen and mermen's greatest desire is to live on land beneath the sun, to be free of the oppression that keeps them in the ocean. How they all gather by the sunlight tree Eve, the closest thing they can find to real sunlight. Fisher Tiger didn't name his crew the Fishman Pirates, he named them the Sun Pirates because what he fought for was freedom. The absolute biggest example of this is the recurring idea of the dawn of the world. Now, the clearest explanation we get of this idea is from Pedro in Whole Cake Island, where we get a lot of insight into his motivations and how he views the world. In chapter 850, during his fight with Baron Tamago, we see a flashback of Pedro giving up his eye in order to escape Big Mom. "The day of the dawn of the world is nigh. I must return home." He then goes on to say, "The Straw Hat crew saved my homeland. I owe them my life. I am certain that they will one day guide the world to a new dawn. They shall surpass you all and change the world." Later in Pedro's dying moments, we get another glimpse at his past. To Perospero, he explains what the meaning of his crew's name is, which is the Nox Pirates, and that's in reference to the night, because to him, night is synonymous with the moment before the dawn. "If I can lay the foundation for the dawning of the world, that the men I look up to await, I'll be happy." And he does just that. His sacrifice is essential to the Straw Hat crew's escape in Whole Cake Island, and it is a testament to how powerful this idea of the dawn is. It is symbolic of great change, of freedom from the world government's oppressive, centuries-long grip upon the world. There are many theories about the dawn and its connection to the D-Clan and to the Straw Hat, but I'm not here to make guesses. The dawn, the moment the sun rises, is definitively tied to the core theme of One Piece and has been since the beginning. The title of both Volume 1 and Chapter 1 of the story is Romance Dawn. Taking it a step further back, the prototype manga for One Piece is also titled Romance Dawn. So this idea of the sun being connected to adventure and freedom has been in Oda's mind since before One Piece as we know it even existed. Now, most people have picked up on this, but if you haven't, going through the series again, you'll be shocked at just how present sun imagery is in the series. I still pick up on new details every time I go through. But it's very important to note that Pedro, someone who has spent his entire life waiting for the world's dawn, is certain beyond a shadow of a doubt that Luffy is the man who will bring it. The scale of this idea is massive, not just in-world but for the story as a whole. One Piece is about the dawn, the moment the night of the world government's rule ends, and Nika is a representation of the dawn. God of the sun, warrior of liberation. It is completely fitting that someone with those powers would spearhead this incredible event. Was this unexpected? Yes, absolutely. Did it come out of nowhere? Just with how it ties that aspect together, I don't think it's fair to say that it did. And that's only the first part of the whole discussion. So it's very clear that the sun is representative of freedom, but what exactly is the relation to Luffy? Well, honestly, that's pretty clear too. Luffy is literally freedom personified. He does what he wants, when he wants, where he wants, to who he wants. He refuses to stand in line and take orders from anyone. He refuses to let the sociological and physical borders of the world stand in his way. One of the clearest examples of Luffy being representative of total, unrelenting freedom comes during the Sabaody Archipelago arc. We as readers all know what the Celestial Dragons represent. They are dictators of the entire world, completely devoid of any morals, and they diametrically oppose freedom. They are stuck-up, idiotic scumbags that view themselves as gods. They see humans as a separate species far beneath them, as playthings they can buy, take, marry, and kill on a whim. They also command great and unquestionable power, the ability to summon an admiral whenever they desire. Luffy knows this. He knows what a death sentence opposing such a person is. He fully understands the consequences, but he shows not even a second of hesitation when physically assaulting one of them. Because that man hurt his friend, because he attempted to purchase another friend, and because the entire time Luffy was in his presence, Luffy saw the antithesis of his entire belief system. That unflinching desire to stomp out oppression and anything that limits freedom is one of the primary characteristics of who Luffy is. It's something that defines his character and by extension the entire entire series. There's this blueprint for One Piece arcs that's basically a meme at this point, one that people who don't like the series frequently use to label it as repetitive. Straw Hats show up at an island, learn about tragedy and oppression, defeat villain-free islands, celebrate, and sail away. Funny meme and true to an extent. Obviously it's never as simple as that, but one point that's very, very true is how frequently the main cast encounters oppressed peoples and liberates them. It's almost like the world of One Piece is extremely fucked up and the entire story is about revolution. Shocker! Okay, but really, Luffy has always been a sort of warrior of liberation like Nika. But importantly, what he does never comes from a sense of duty. Luffy has never tried to be a hero. He doesn't show up to islands suffering under an oppressive ruler and think, as a hero, it's my job to fix this. It's always been more like, this is messed up and I don't like it, so I'm gonna fix it. There's a key difference between those two things. A major element of the Fishman Island arc is exactly this. Much of the roadblocks surrounding Hody Jones was how his defeat was framed. The Straw Hats couldn't just stumble into Fishman Island, whoop Hody, party, and then take off like they usually do, despite it being well within their capabilities. Despite what the main characters in Fishman Island royalty knew about Hody, the general populace wasn't aware of the things he had done and was planning to do. And considering the centuries of fishmen being oppressed by humans, it would look really bad if all of a sudden humans showed up and just beat Hody to a pulp. So Jinbei's solution to this was to position Luffy as the savior of Fishman Island. Luffy disagrees with this. He says that a hero is someone who shares meat and he doesn't want to be that. Funny moment, very popular moment, but sometimes I see people boiling down his feelings to literally just that when it's much more complicated than just not wanting to share food. First, that sentiment is inherently selfish, which shows that Luffy isn't the type to do things just for the benefit of others. Second, 2 pages later, Luffy says that he hates being cheered on by anybody, which reinforces that idea. Third, and most importantly, when the Straw Hats arrive at Concord Plaza, civilians scream, asking if they are friends or foes, if they are the heroes that they've been seeking. Luffy answers by saying that they can decide that for themselves. I think this is extremely important context for Luffy's character and for what the meaning of the Gear 5 power-up does for his character. Obviously, through his actions, Luffy can and often is framed as a virtuous hero type, seeking to free everyone. But as readers, we are aware of his intentions, and there's a pretty significant difference between action and intention. Luffy doesn't intend to be some hero liberator, some force of justice and freedom. He just is by nature. That's an incredibly important distinction. Where at the opposite, you would just have a very typical hero character on his hero's journey to become a hero, where he gets a heroic power and heroes his way to the hero finish line. What the truth of Luffy means is that you have a character whose entire being and philosophy is a rebellion against the foundation of the world. And that character will rise up to change things not because he is some hero seeking to be righteous, but because by nature of who he is, what he stands for, and how he stands for it, change occurs. Luffy will bring change not by actively seeking change, but simply by bringing himself. That goes deeper than motivation. Motivation, determination, these things can be crushed. Time and time again, we see that who Luffy is absolutely cannot be crushed or warped or changed. His beliefs are unwavering. I mean, he's rubber after all. Try to crush him and he'll just bounce back. This is just pure speculation, but I think that's why the fruit chose Luffy. We know it seems to have a mind of its own, according to the world government, so the thought that it made a choice isn't absurd to me. But I think it chose Luffy not because he's some mystical being destined to change the world. I think it chose him because it saw the type of person he is. Maybe it heard his true dream. Who knows? It's hard to say. But I really don't think Luffy's connection to the fruit boils down to it being destiny. I think it has everything to do with who Luffy is and always has been as a person, regardless of any freedom symbolizing fruit. He is the perfect match for the fruit, and as we see with other awakened fruit users, that seems to be a requirement for awakening. Doflamingo has the string fruit, and he is a master manipulator, pulling the strings of the underworld. Then you have Katakuri with the mochi fruit. Mochi is extremely pliable and can easily take on different shapes, which is exactly what he does to fit how his family perceives him. Those aren't the only examples, but I don't think it's a stretch to say Luffy was able to awaken his devil fruit because of who he is and not because he was destined to do it all along. Now that's a lot of talk about how Luffy is the embodiment of freedom, and it's definitely important to the whole conversation considering what the fruit itself is, but there's a question that remains, a pretty important one at that. Did he need it? Luffy is an unstoppable force of freedom, and with the sun so clearly representing freedom, those ideas are already connected, albeit pretty loosely and certainly not textually. Luffy did not absolutely need the power of Sun God Nika to be the force of liberation he's meant to be and really always has been, but I would argue that the story is better for it. The truth of the Gum Gum fruit tightens the connection between these series-spanning ideas and certainly gives it that textual foundation I said it didn't have before. It concretely ties these ideas together and allows them to be wrapped up very cleanly as we near the end of the series. The power itself is awesome. It's the perfect balance of funny and cool, which is One Piece to a T. It ties together many important ideas of the story into a neat bow and builds a strong connection between Luffy and those ideas. It also opens many doors for the story in regards to connecting and paralleling the lost history of the world with the present story. Joy Boy and Nika were obviously figures in the past, and with Luffy inheriting these monikers, there are certainly connections there, ones that are pretty damn important, and ones I'd place my bet on Oda having had ideas about for a very long time. Before I wrap things up, I'd like to speak a bit on whether or not this was planned and how people view things being planned and foreshadowed in One Piece. Was this planned? Who knows? I don't, you don't, and we never will unless Oda comes out and says it. I understand how satisfying foreshadowing can be, but let's be real, a lot of the fandom misunderstands foreshadowing and confuses it with Oda tying things that he left open-ended together. That is something Oda does not get enough credit for, his ability to tie things together in a consistently satisfying and fitting way. Foreshadowing is but one narrative tool, one that the fandom puts too much weight on as if every single moment must be foreshadowed in order to be good. Gear 5 and its reveal isn't great because back in Skypiea the sun god was mentioned, or because in Dressrosa Doflamingo said rubber shouldn't work like that. Gear 5 is great because it is One Piece at its core, because it is the culmination of over 2 decades worth of thematic storytelling, because it highlights everything great about Luffy's character and is a reward for both him and readers. And to be honest, I think Oda did have it planned for a long time. Maybe not the name Nika, but the idea that the final evolution of the Gum Gum fruit would reflect Luffy as a character and what the entire story means, and that it would be representative of some figure of liberation. Most characters with devil fruits have powers that fit their character perfectly. Sometimes it's to a comical degree. There's also Haki, which is a direct manifestation of will, something obviously important to the story as a whole. Oda is a very thoughtful writer, and he definitely thinks about how powers reflect characters and the narrative surrounding them. He also thinks about his world. Clearly he does. One Piece is often touted as having phenomenal world building. One of the most important aspects of the world is the Void Century, and with that the poneglyphs. These are ideas he's had a long time. He didn't just write poneglyphs into the story without thinking about who would be sending the messages written upon them. Oda has known about Joy Boy and what he represented in the long distant past for a very long time, and I think it's pretty obvious he's had Luffy's connection to it all in mind for equally as long. Obviously that is just speculation, but it's ridiculous to dismiss the idea that someone as thorough and thoughtful as Oda has known things as big as this for a long time when clearly he's been laying the groundwork. So were the specifics of the Nika reveal planned way in advance? It doesn't matter. That doesn't determine its value. Everything else surrounding it does, and I think it's absolutely amazing. Anyway, that's all I have to say on it. If you made it to the end of this video, I greatly appreciate you sticking around. I would appreciate it even more if you left a like and subscribed. Let me know what you feel about Gear 5 down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and until next time.